ورتل القرآن ترتيلا.
Assalamu alaikum. In this lesson, we will be looking at the topic of Idghaam, merging. Our learning objectives are to understand the meaning of Idghaam, to understand the three categories of Idghaam and its sub-branches, to understand Idghaam Mutamathilaan, to understand Idghaam Mutajanisaan, and to understand Idghaam Mutaqaribaan. So what is Idghaam? Idgham is the merging of two letters to fulfill the requirement of lightness and ease in pronunciation. Linguistically, idgham means combining into a single body. Technically, it means pronouncing the two letters as one letter with a shadda. There are three categories of idgham: Idgham Mutamathilaan, Idghaam Mutajanisaan, and Idghaam Mutaqaribaan. Idghaam Mutamathilaan are when there are two identical letters. Both the letters have the same makharij and the same sifat. Idghaam Mutajanisaan is when there are two similar letters, so both have the same makharij but different sifat. And Idghaam Mutaqaribaan are two close letters, so both the letters are close either in makharij or either in sifat. Each of these three categories are subdivided into saghir, which means small, where there is a sukoon on the first letter and a haraka on the second letter; kabir, which means big, where there is a haraka on the first letter and a haraka on the second letter; and mutlaq, which means absolute, where there is a haraka on the first letter and sukoon on the second letter. Let's look at each one in more detail. So, Mutamathilaan, we mentioned it is two identical letters. So both the letters will have the same makharij and the same sifat. This can be found in either one word or two words. So we will look at some examples. So two identical letters, both letters have the same makharij and the sifat can be found in one or two words. So an example of saghir, we have the word here, qulla. Now the first letter, as you can see, lam, has a sakin, and the second letter of lam has a haraka of fatah. You can see that it has a shadda sign on the second letter. So this is known as complete merging. We will be merging the lams together, and because the first letter is a sakin and the second letter has a haraka, it will be known as Idghaam Mutamathilaan Saghir. Our second example, which we can see on the word Al-Kitabi Bil-Haqqi. So we are going to be looking at the letter ba, the end of the first word ba, and the beginning of the second word ba. The first letter of ba has a kasra and the second letter has a kasra. So both have a haraka. Both letters are pronounced distinctly. So this is known as Idghaam Mutamathilaan Kabir, as the first letter has a haraka and the second letter has a haraka. The third category that we will look at is mutlaq. Here the first letter has a haraka and the second letter has a sukoon. So if we have a look at this example, shaqaqna, the qaf, the first qaf has a fatah and the second qaf has a sukoon. Both the letters are pronounced distinctly, so this is known as Idghaam Mutamathilaan Mutlaq. However, we do not apply this rule if the two identical letters are waw or ya and the first is a huruf mad. So for example, as you can see here, fi yawm. On the first word, there is the letter ya, and on the beginning of the second word, there is a letter ya. However, fi is part of huruf mad. So because of this reason, we do not call it idgham mutamathil. Another example is for the letter waw. Again, the same concept. Amanu wa amilu. So the waw attached to the first word is to do with huruf mad, because waw sakina preceded by a dhamma. Amanu wa amilu, and the waw is read distinctly. We can't read it as amanu wa amilu fi yawm. So this would not be categorized as idgham mutamathil. Also, if there is a sakt in between the two letters. So, for example, here you can see at the end of ayah number 28, we have the word here maliyah. At the beginning of ayah number 29, we have halaka. So we can't say maliyah halaka, and you can see that there is no shadda on the ha anyway. So we would say ma aghna anni maliyah halaka, a small breathless pause if we were to continue. So this would not be categorized as idgham mutamathil. The next category we will look at is Idghaam Mutajanisaan. This is where two similar letters, both the letters have the same makharij but different in sifat, in either the same word or two separate words. This occurs with three groups of letters: ba and mim, ta, dal and to, and tha, dhal and dho. So if we have a look at some examples now, we will first look at Idghaam Mutajanisaan Saghir. So as we remember, Saghir is when the first letter is sakin and the second letter has a haraka. Here we will do a complete merging. So on the first word, we can see the letter ba, and the second word begins with the letter mim. The mim has a shadda. So we would completely disregard the ba and we would join the kaf to the mim. So we wouldn't read it as irkab ma'ana, we would say irkam ma'ana. The second, the same concept, we would disregard the letter dal and we would join the qaf fata to the ta fata. And you can see there is a shadda on the ta. We wouldn't say as qad tabayyana, you would say qad tabayyana. The third example, again, we would disregard the letter dal and we would join the hamza kasra to the letter dha and we would say idhalamu. This is known as idgham mutajanisaan saghir. An example of idgham mutajanisaan kabir. Here, as we remember, for kabir, it's when the first letter has a haraka and the second letter also has a haraka. Here both the letters have to be pronounced distinctly. So you can see here the letter ta and the letter to. The letter ta has the dhamma and the letter to has a dhamma. We're going to read them both distinctly. فَالصَّالِحَاتُ طُوبًا. So this is known as idgham mutajanisaan kabir. The third example is of mutlaq. Now, as we remember, for mutlaq, the first letter is a haraka and the second letter has a sukoon. So for mutlaq, both letters are pronounced distinctly. So we have a look at our example of the word أَفَتَطْمَعُونَ. The letter ta has a fata and the letter to has a sukoon. We are reading them distinctly, and so this is known as Idghaam Mutajanisaan Mutlaq. There are 4 words of incomplete merging. So these are 4 words that meet the conditions of Saghir, which means that the first letter is a saqin and the second letter has a haraka, but they are not completely merged. These examples are of the word basatta from Surah Al-Ma'idah, ayah number 28. Ahattu, Surah Al-Naml, ayah number 22. Farrattu, Surah Al-Zumar, ayah 56. And farrattum, Surah Yusuf, ayah 80. Now what is the reason for this? It is due to the fact that the letter ta is heavier than the letter ta, so we need to give that letter its thickness. As you can see, we don't do the qalqala, even though the letter ta is part of qalqala, and you will also notice that the second letter does not have a shadda. So that is why it is incomplete merging. Our third concept is Mutaqaribaan. This is where two close letters, both letters are close in either makharij or in sifat. These are categorized where the letter lam and the ra come together, the letter qaf and the letter kaf, they come together, and when any of the letters of idgham apart from the letter noon come together, which means ya, ra, mim, lam and waw. And the fourth is shamsi letters, when any of the 14 sun letters are preceded by the word al. So for example, we have here for lam and ra, وَقُرْ رَبِّي, for qaf and kaf, أَلَمْ نَخْلُقكُمْ, for the idgham situation, مَنْ يَعْمَلْ, and for the shamsi letters, ad-duha. Now let's look at each one in a bit of detail. So again, if you remember, the terminology of saghir is when the first letter is a sakin and the second letter has a haraka. So we can see here from our examples, we have the letter lam and the letter ra next to each other. The letter lam has a sukun and the letter ra has a shadda. So we would disregard the letter lam and we would pronounce the letter qaf with the dhamma with the letter ra. وَقُرْ رَبِّي, complete merging. Again, for the next word, the qaf and the kaf are next to each other. The qaf is a sukoon, the next letter has a shadda. Complete merge the letters. So we would say alam nakhluqkum. This is known as idgham mutaqaribaan saghir. Our next example is of kabir. If we remind ourselves that kabir is when the first letter is a haraka and the second letter has a haraka. Both these letters are pronounced distinctly. So we have an example of qaf and kaf, both have a dhamma. And the letter lam and ra, they both have a fatha. So the first one you would say narzuqukum. Both letters are pronounced distinctly. Qala rabbi. So here both letters are pronounced distinctly. This is known as idgham mutaqaribaan kabir. And the next category we will look at is mutlaq. If we remind ourselves, mutlaq is when the first letter has a haraka and the second letter has a sukoon. Both the letters will be pronounced distinctly. So if we look at our first example, we have the letter ta and tha. And on the second example, we have the letter sin and nun. So these letters, as we remind ourselves, for mutaqariban is if they are close either in sifat or close in makharij. So yastathnuna, both letters are pronounced distinctly. Sundusun, both letters are pronounced distinctly. So this is known as idgham mutaqariban mutlaq. If we remind ourselves that when there is a sakta, there will be an exception to this rule. So for example, for the letter lam and ra, we have bal rana. We cannot do an idgham between this due to the sakta. And also waqila man raq, again exception due to sakta. So just to summarize it all now, we have three branches of idgham: Mutamathilaan, Mutajanisaan and Mutaqaribaan. Mutamathilaan is when there are two identical letters, both the letters have the same makharij and the same sifat. Mutajanisaan are two similar letters where both have the same makharij but different in sifat. And Mutaqaribaan are two close letters. Both letters are close either in makharij or either in sifat. If we look at the example of Mutamathilaan saghir, where the first letter is sakin and the second letter has a haraka. So ulla, two lams. Kabir, first letter has a haraka, second letter has a haraka. Al-kitabi bil-haq. And the third category is mutlaq, where the first letter is a haraka and the second letter has a sukoon. For example, shaqaqana. For Mutajanisaan, the three categories of letters are ba, mim, ta, dal, and to, and tha, val, and dha. So for Sagir, we have Idghaam معنا. For Kabir, we have فالصالحات طوبى. For Mutlaq, we have أفتطمعون. There are exceptions to the rules of Mutajanisaan. أحط, فرطت, بسطت, فرطتم. For Mutaqaribaan, we have four categories. When there is an idgham without the noon involved, lam and ra, qaf and kaf, and the word al and shamsi letters. So for Saghir, we have examples. الضحى من يعمل وقل ربي ألم نخلقكم. For Kabir, we have an example. نرزقكم. And for Mutlaq, يستثنون. So what have we learnt in this lesson? What is the meaning of Idgham? What are the three categories of Idgham and its sub-branches? We understand the term Idgham Mutamathilaan. We understand Idgham Mutajanisaan, and we understand Idgham Mutaqaribaan. Hope you have benefited from this lesson. Keep seeking knowledge. Ma'as salama.